spares in the trunk.
Yeah, exactly, just run and gun. So it's amazing to see that, and you may be able to bust out more volume, but again, you're not playing it safe, and I would much prefer to play it safe and not let anyone get hurt.
Yeah, probability, luck, and randomness are typically something that I don't play with unless I'm doing lottery or going out to a casino or something like that, but not with my helicopters. That's why I very frequently tell you guys, don't turn your transmitters off first, or hey, when I see you leaning down in the Thunderdome over your bird, like, hey, are you disarmed? Because probability says that somebody's going to get cut.
At some point, yes. But I'm trying to think of another good thing. So with the Wukong, as far as different nuances, I've noticed with this flight controller, for the most part, it's very reliable. This aircraft here has about, I would say, probably closing on 40 hours of flight on it, actual airtime. My other aircraft had about 150 hours on it, and the flight controller is just fine. You can swap them out. So what I did in my third iteration aircraft, I disassembled and reused the Wukong on this new aircraft. So a lot of times the flight controller will much outlast your, or longer outlast your bearings and that sort of thing. Again, if you're just messing with these aircraft, you normally don't have to think about those sort of things, but these big motors are putting, hundreds of hours on the machine. Eventually the bearings are going to wear and go out, and you're going to get screws that start to loosen even if you lock tight. You just got to check. So a lot of the things that I'll check when I first get on the site, I won't even consciously do it. I'll just kind of rip a prop and do a little wiggle, make sure my screws are nice and tight, and I'll check my cell phone, make sure we've got good space weather going on.
This is that ritual I was telling you guys about establishing. This is some of Victor's ritual.
Yeah, so when you get on site, you just have a few things that you do just to make sure your aircraft is good. Another thing, I never take off in GPS mode. Even if I need GPS mode for the flight, like if I'm doing a panorama and I need the whole position, never take off in GPS mode. One good example of that is, I don't know what the open pilot compasses are like. They're probably, they're probably pretty sensitive.
These guys are all using no compass or no GPS, but yeah, we're going through magnetometer calibration exercises with the team now, and trying to make it user friendly versus sensitive. And we are on the side of sensitivity, whereas others are on the side of user friendliness. Then you wind up with your craft flying the wrong direction. But
that's a really good point. We were down in Portsmouth, Ohio, and we were doing a shoot for barges that come in on the river. And first thing we got on site, I said, look, there's probably a lot of iron on site. You've got to be really careful because ferromagnetic substances mess with your compass. If you have, I saw a guy recently got close to a Ferris wheel, aircraft just took off towards the Ferris wheel because it's a giant chunk of iron. And all of a sudden the compass goes, somebody's riveting that to put it together, they're magnetizing that whole structure as they rivet. And it might be a weak magnet, but it's a very large weak magnet. And compasses will pick up on that. And so, for example, we were down there on the Ohio River, and there's just iron over everywhere. The entire dock is made out of iron, and so you're like, oh, I probably shouldn't take off from GPS mode here. And sure enough, you power your thing on, it starts telling you bad compass data. Take off in compass mode.
You're facing north, and it's telling you you're on the GCS that you're looking south, and then you're looking east, and you're not even moving.
It's lost stuff going on. But there's things like that. You just got to know based on the site, what's going on. Don't take off over buried power lines. For example, over here across the river, in front of Cosi, there's an area over there. There's a big square green, and it looks harmless enough, but if you look, it's completely surrounded in power lines, and there are lines dropping in the ground everywhere. And so that whole area is just crisscrossed with underground power lines. And you can plug it in one spot and have it tell you bad compass data, and then go to another, 3 feet away, plug it in, and it'll be fine because you're not directly over the line. And so you just have to be aware of your surroundings and know, okay, are there buried power lines? Are there issues that will interfere with my compass, if you're going to use them. So that's why my rule of thumb is part of my ritual, like Kevin's saying, is I just, as soon as I power up the aircraft, I make sure it's in attitude mode. Actually, before I even power on the aircraft, I make sure the switch is in attitude mode. And so that's, again, one of the rituals specifically with this. Now, the funny thing is the Wukong compass is considered to not be that sensitive. The A2 compass, which the third generation down for their professional flight controllers. It's incredibly sensitive. So to give an example of that, when I was in Missouri, I was out there helping, I don't know if you guys have heard of the drone dudes. They sell aircraft and stuff like that. They do, most of their stuff is, Hollywood shoots, but they don't really know how to build aircraft, but they'll sell aircraft. So they contracted me to go out there and consult with them on an aircraft build. And when I first got out there, you expect things to go as planned. Oh yeah, the aircraft's going to be ready. You get out there, the aircraft is not ready. And so it's not even assembled. We get out there, and the place where they had the puck was directly on the ESC wires. And I said, obviously that's not going to work. You've got 3 lines of electricity running directly below the puck. You have to move it. And they said, well, with the Wukong, it doesn't affect it. And I said, this is not the Wukong, this is the A2. The compass is supposedly 8 times as sensitive. It's twice as large. You have to elevate it and get it away from any electronic interference. They didn't listen, and they could not get a GPS lock, period. It wouldn't even pick up a satellite because all it was picking up was this interference with these lines. So finally, they listened to me, they moved it slightly, they elevated it, and realized, okay, I'm getting 3 satellites now. There's still issues. So it elevated it more. They were getting 7 satellites. But with a A2 puck, GPS puck, you're supposed to get a minimum of 14 as soon as you power on. So what we had to do is we had to move it to the center of the aircraft and move it up as high as we could. That gave us more satellites, but it was only 8, and we couldn't figure out why. Well, believe it or not, this wire, just because it was bumping another wire, every time we would roll in flight, it would roll away from the wire, and you would grab a bunch of satellites. And then roll back the other way, the satellites would drop, because you could see it on your headset in the IMSD. And the satellites would go from 14 to 5. 14 to 5. And that was how we realized, okay, this wire is just bumping another wire. That's all it is. That's all it took to kill, what was it, 6 or 7 satellites worth of that's how much interference it was picking up on one power line. So then we had to strap the line away from all wires and make sure it was correct. But that's how sensitive these compasses are getting. And that's some of the problems that they're encountering, even with the newest and latest flight controllers, is they'll have issues like that.
And that really highlights the fact that you need to be familiar with whatever craft that you're working with. I've obviously helped you guys familiarize yourself with OpenPilot. If you move forward, you would just need to do that with whatever you chose.
Yeah.
Now, he's your spotter. Is he also your camera operator, or just your spot operator?
Jimmy does camera operation. We kind of go back and forth. Sometimes it's all on one aircraft, depending if we're doing pictures or video. If we're doing video, we have another transmitter set up with a separate receiver.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about how you two work together, what some of the role of, one versus the other is. For example, I actually just briefly discussed with him today the mechanics of, how you could be a camera operator, and, the need for a second transmitter and things of that nature.
One of the great things is with Jimmy out there, it really is fluid in the fact that if we get onto the site and we realize, okay, I'm going to have to make a couple corners, you need to operate the camera, it's pretty easy to set up. We can swap it out, get a receiver on there, set up. And hopefully we've done it beforehand. It's not always the case, but we'll get out there and we'll get set up. And the transmitter is the exact same way. And the pitch of the camera essentially just operates with the throttle stick. So we've got to set it up with a separate receiver, and particularly with this gimbal, with this little Phantom gimbal or whatever that goes on here, you run a wire out of the X3 port. So you're going to run wires out of different ports with different flight controllers or different receivers. But because this gimbal is integrated with this flight controller, the actual gimbal control goes through the flight controller, so you have to run it to a receiver, a separate receiver.
So most gimbal controllers, they have their own algorithm for stabilizing the camera on board. Your flight controller usually has a better algorithm and a better processor. So what they enable you to do is basically daisy chain that input. So you plug outputs from your flight controller into the inputs on your gimbal controller, and your flight controller has the ability to help the leveling algorithm in the gimbal controller. In this case, with his gear, that also gives him an interface for radio control as well.
So if we get into a spot where it's tight in between buildings, and I know I'm not going to want to fly from a single camera, I can't see side to side, I'm not going to want to be going like this looking through the goggles. I'll give Jimmy the goggles he'll run with the camera and tell me if the shot's good, and I'll just fly line of sight. And line of sight, personally, I believe is easier than flying FPV. FPV is fun and great, and it works good if you're just shooting photos. But if you're in between buildings, you can't see what's behind you, and you've got all sorts of hazards. Trees and lines. There have been a couple times where, because a lot of the dials are SD, you can't see the power lines. You'll be coming in between two poles, and you won't see these poles. I mean, it was amazing. It was a miracle. I was flying down when we were in Portsmouth. I was chasing a dump truck, carrying the load from a barge, and I was about a story and a half up, and Jimmy says, "You see those power lines?" I said, "No, I don't see the power lines. I don't see them at all." So I just brought the aircraft, and we didn't even think twice about it. I didn't even think about it anymore because I didn't think there were power lines in the way. I thought he was imagining it, but he wasn't. He was like, "There are power lines. They are there. You need to keep an eye out." And so thankfully we didn't have any issue there.
So what sort of communication is going on back and forth between you guys while you're flying? Like, what are some of the terms you might use, or what would you be saying? Like, are you literally, "Hey, I need you to go left, go right"?
We use roll left, roll right for moving side to side, yaw for looking. So roll, yaw, and pitch. So if I say, if Jimmy's looking at it and he's like, "Hey, I need you to go faster, but I need you to roll left," and he means move left, instead of look left. So he wants me to move left while he's pitching or something like that. So.
And all of that should be common terms to you guys by now. You're doing that as you fly naturally. So
yeah, and that's something that actually gets confusing with the clients, particularly, especially when you get a client that wants to direct a shoot. They'll be saying, "You need to go left," and you say, "Okay, I'll go left," and you roll left because you're interpreting it as roll. But then, no, look left, my left, look left, and you're like, "Oh, okay, you want me to yaw left?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, that's what I mean, yaw left." And so a lot of times before a shoot, if you have a client that's going to direct it, between me and Jimmy, we both know those terms in second nature. But with the client, they don't think about those terms at all. They don't know how to describe to you what they want, and so you need to kind of educate them beforehand. This is how you communicate with me, so we get this done most of the time.
do you use head trackers at all?
I've wanted to. I've never used a head tracker. I've thought about it a couple times, so they can just look.
Yeah, so one of the options for your camera operator is you can get them a gyro for their head, basically, and usually you tie it to one of the switches on your radio, but when they hit the switch, it translates what would normally be thumb inputs into head inputs. So obviously, if you have a pain in the butt client like he's discussing that can't speak aircraft terms to you and feels the need to direct, you could, for example, just give them control of that head mount, or the head tracker rather, and then they could look at whatever they wanted to look at.
And that's pretty common nowadays, with immersion RC and immersion goggles. I think it comes in almost all the lowest immersion model, right? They've all got gyros in them now. I think all the dominators, all the
Attitudes,
all the attitudes, all the dominators, but not the newest one.
The transporter, teleporter, or something like that.
The real cheap one, like $199 or something.
Yeah, they're cutting corners on cost, so they rip the gyros out of it.
It really crops your screen in too.
Yep.
It'll crop your view, so be careful when buying the cheapest. Cheap is good, but cheapest is bad. So yeah, communication as far as that goes, I don't know. What do you think, Jimmy? How long did it take you to get used to that? Yeah, it's pretty easy once we got started.
How'd you guys hook up?
Well, actually, we worked together for a long time. We worked at a restaurant together a long time ago, and finally I said, "Hey, you need to come work with me." And he said, "Yeah, I do. I hate this." I said, "All right, let's go have fun."
So there you go. As I was telling you guys, Victor literally stopped working at a restaurant to do this as his career, and it looks like he drugged Jimmy along with him.
I did.
So,
I was like, you know what? I am not leaving you here. It sucks.
So when I was joking about pairing up with somebody in class, I mean that's
literally what you need to do.
It's an option.
If you want to do this for a living, you just got to do it. It's really scary at first. I mean, I think it's 2 years ago now that I quit my job. I just quit. My wife looked at me like...
I told him he was crazy. Flat out. I said, "Dude, you are nuts."
I know. And my wife looked at me the same way. She's like, "Really? You quit your job?" I'm like, "It'll work. It'll work. It'll work." And
yeah, he tried to convince me to try to help him. I told him to go fly a kite.
But hey, I mean, and that's how it turned out good because Kevin's
Yeah, it's funny. We've both gone our own different directions in making a career out of something that was a hobby. So,
it's absolutely it just comes down to doing what you love to do. If you really love this and you love using it to make videos or imaging or whatever imaging really speaks to you, particularly, I mean, I know there are photographers in here. I know there are probably videographers in here, and I don't know if any of you guys are fine art students, but whatever you want to do, you just got to do it. And that's what, for me, it was just like, I cannot work in restaurants the rest of my life. I've got, between Columbus State and OSU, I've got like 240 credit hours. And I have an associate's degree. Because I had no idea what I wanted to do. I've got enough for 4 bachelors, you know what I mean? And so I just didn't know what I wanted to do. I studied language, I speak Arabic, Spanish, and English, but there's no jobs in that. And then when I saw these, my dad told me about it. He's like, hey, back in 2008, he's like, man, multi-rotors are really climbing. You need to do this. And I said, sure, whatever. And then later on, I saw one, and I thought, yeah, I need to do that. And then from there, I just started working at it. Got one of these. I got a Gowie 330X. Crashed it about 100 times, learning how to fly it, and put it back together. And I disintegrated that thing. Most people haven't smashed Gowies as much as I've smashed Gowie, but to get all your crashing out of the way. Once you get your crashing out of the way, and you feel really comfortable in the air, and you can get turned around and hold your transfer. I don't know, you probably showed them that trick, you showed them the orientation trick where you get out and
rocket.
Yeah, you're like, oh my gosh, it's going. Which way am I going? Forward, backward, Yep. You just hold this up. That's left, that's right, That's kind of one of the orientation tricks you get.
That's kind of what I was telling you guys about that story where the guy from Ready Made helped. I think they were out flying at a school, and this dude came out with a Phantom, mumbling all this jive about how he was going to start a business, and then, lost his helicopter up in the air, and, the guy from Ready Made said, I was just stick banging it. Just literally, I went up there and just bang it to the left, bang it to the right, and, you just look to see where it's going and get your orientation back. And that's exactly pretty much what he's talking about.
When Jimmy first started flying a while ago, he got out over a field, same thing, it was at dusk, and I shouldn't have had to fly at dusk, but it's fun. Sometimes, we were out there, and it was with a little 450. That's our training copter, little flame wheel 450. And got it out there, and it was probably a good 1,000 feet away.
Fast.
They were real fast, especially when they got no payload, and you're cranking it, and you're in, and it's with one of these little atoms, and you can make those things real zippy.